Welcome everyone to a little bit of light awaiting Moshiach. There was a famous individual who lived in Europe before World War II. He passed away in the early 1930s, who is famously known as the Chafetz Chaim. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan. He lived in the city, or his final place of residence was the city of Radun, which was in what we call White Russia, I believe. And he's an individual that unbelievably has so much influence on the Jewish world to this day. He died when he was in his 90s, and he was really seen as one of the ultimate leaders of European Jewry because of his righteousness, his scholarliness, and his care and love for the Jewish people. In Jewish law, he has a famous work called the Mishnah Brura. He's famously known for his work on compiling the laws of Lashon Hara, what constitutes evil speech, what we may say, what we may not say. He called that book Chafetz Chaim, and he was known from then on as the Chafetz Chaim. That's how he's referred to. And he was well known for always being aware of what's going on in the Jewish people, although he wasn't even officially, he had a yeshiva. I do not believe he was officially even the rabbi of the city of Radun where he lived, but he was recognized as a leader and he understood his position amongst the Jewish people. And whenever there was a need, he would address it, very often in his writings and very often in person. Even in his elderly years, if he found out in a community there was something needed to be done, and it wasn't his community, but it was somewhere, he would go and address it. And people listened because everybody knew of him and respected him. And there's a work called Machne Yisrael, which literally means the camp of Israel, which he actually wrote for Jewish soldiers who were conscripted into the government armies, Russia, Poland. And he wrote a whole work for them to help them be able to remain loyal Jews as much as possible under those very trying conditions. And in it, he has chapters which he dedicates to the coming of Moshiach. The 25th chapter is called Gulas Yisrael, which means the redemption of the Jewish people. One can understand very well why a Jewish soldier would need to focus on the redemption of the coming of Moshiach. And in it, this chapter calls it Gulas Yisrael, the redemption of the Jewish people. And he always writes a kind of a heading of what to expect in the chapter. It shall be explained here how a person needs to constantly be in a state of waiting, anticipating the redemption of the Jewish people through Mashiach. I'm going to read to you some parts of it from inside, some of it I'll speak out. And he begins talking about something we've mentioned very often before from the Talmud in Shabbos, that one of the questions that a person is asked after he has finished his time here on earth is Tzipisa Yeshua. Have you hoped for, have you anticipated the salvation of Mashiach? And he says that understandably, this is something that we know is something that is, Masr Alev. It means it's something inside of us. The fact that somebody asks you, do you await Mashiach, and you say yes, doesn't necessarily tell us what's really going on inside, what you really feel and believe. If the question of there's a question, have you awaited Mashiach? The question is not, did you just say so? Was it real? Did you really anticipate the coming of Mashiach? Do you really await? Which is dependent on having a true belief in the coming of Mashiach, and then having a genuine desire for him to come and to await his coming. And then he writes like this: It is not for no reason that the prophets compared. We find in the prophets the ultimate redemption being compared to an expectant mother. Just as a expectant mother every day is getting closer to the birth, every day we get closer to the light of redemption. And if he seems to be delaying, we want him to come already, we feel it's time for him to come already, and he doesn't come, we'll continue waiting. Because he's going to come without any kind of question. That is what our belief has to be. It has to start with a belief. It's going to happen. We have to truly believe that it's going to happen. And once we believe it's going to happen, then we have that's the first step. Next step is to await his coming. But the Chavetz Chaim is stressing how, in order to be able to answer that question, we have to have a true belief that Mashiach is going to come. And even if it appears that he's taking time, he's not here yet, where is he? We still wait. Because every day we're getting another step closer to the light of the redemption. And then he mentioned something that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and that is, even anything that Hashem mentioned in the most indirect way, anything that Hashem has hinted, the hint of a hint, to what would happen in regard to other redemptions, have all come true. Where it be in regard to the redemption from Egypt in all its aspects, that everything that was said, as we mentioned, 2 words. The Torah, there are 2 words in which the redemption of Egypt is referred to, is alluded to. But in those 2 words came out all the miracles and everything that we experienced in the Exodus from Egypt. So too, everything that the Torah predicted and said would happen when we entered the land of Israel the first time came true, and everything that was alluded to the return of the Jewish people after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash and the exile to Babylonia, that we would return to the land, which happened in the times of Ezra, the leader of the Jewish people, Ezra Sofer, Ezra the scribe. Ubein le'inyan kiyomenu ata b'yosenu ben ha'umais sheniskayim aleinu hakasav. Whether we're talking about our continued existence amongst the nations of the world, the fact that even in exile we continue to exist, that is also a fulfillment of what the Torah promised, and that is something that we have in Parshas Bukukosai, in the book of Vayikra, chapter Chavav 26, which is after the chapter known as the Tochacha, the chapter in which Hashem is telling us what will happen if we abandon the Torah. And it talks about in length all the terrible calamities and suffering that the Jewish people will go through. But then it says in Pasuk Mem Daled, verse 44, Va'af gam zois v'yoyis meretz tziveyem. But despite all this, while they will be in the land of their enemies, lo ma'astem lo ga'altem l'chaloisam, I will not have been revolted by them, nor will I have rejected them to obliterate them. La'afer brisi itam, to annul my covenant with them, Kini Hashem Eloheihem, because I am Hashem their God. Hashem promises that even when we are suffering in exile in a terrible state, Hashem says, no matter what, even in those lands, I do not reject them, I do not despise them to annul my covenant with them. That's the promise that says that even in exile, we will not be rejected. Hashem will remember us and Hashem will have mercy on us. And the Chavetz Chaim says that too has been fulfilled. And if you study Jewish history and you look at 1,000 years of the Jewish people being in Europe, of the expulsions they went through, and the decrees they went through, and the abuse they went through, and the pogroms, and eventually the Holocaust that they went through, how many times did the world give up on the Jewish people? But we're here and thriving. And that was all predicted in that verse in Parashas Bechukosai. So the Chavetz Chaim says that if you look at what we have already experienced, it's found in the Torah, it's found in the words of the prophets, and it's all come true, even if it hasn't been that explicit. But we know what it's referring to, and it's come true. Says the Chavetz Chaim, how much more so will this be? Should we believe? Will this be true regarding the promises of the ultimate future redemption that has been promised in the Chavetz Chaim calls it almost explicit, meaning it's pretty clear in the words of the prophets that there is going to be a redemption. And if all the things that the prophets and the Torah has referred to until now have come true, even though they've only been, so to speak, hinted to, how much more so do we have the basis to believe that the ultimate redemption that has been spoke about in length in the words of the prophets and referred to in the Torah, how much more so do we have the basis to believe in all the great miracles of redemption that will come our way. So every single day we get close to the light of the redemption, and we should have no doubts about it, because whatever the Torah has predicted and promised regarding our state of being until now has come true. All that the Torah promises us in the future will also come true. That is part of our unshaken belief in the coming of Moshiach. He's going to come. We may be delaying, but he will come. And that's our belief. And then with that belief, we await his coming. It's been a little bit of light. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos.